In the spring of 2011, I was in the second semester failing out of my sophomore year of a chemical engineering degree at NC State University in Raleigh, North Carolina. I was a stupid kid with a lot on my mind and a lot I was still figuring out. I'd only barely just come out as bi at the time, and I was also pretty regularly imbibing a lot of Coca-Cola original recipe TMCR. In fact, this story involved just such an occasion. We had just finished a round of original recipe around 7 p.m. when the friend, I'm going to use the word friend here loosely, who had provided the Coca-Cola, decided he was thirsty. Now, friends, you have to understand, this was a bar. There were drinks here, lots of drinks, but this friend wanted a special drink, a drink I'd never heard of before and have never forgotten since. Faygo. One problem, the only store that sells Faygo in the area is a 45-minute walk from where we currently are, unless we cut through campus while going up an original recipe Coca-Cola. But our friend, Mr. Faygo, bought the colas, so we didn't have a choice, and so we went. I don't know if you've ever tried to act not suspicious while buzzed on original recipe Coca-Cola, but it's not a thing I'd recommend to, anyone, ever. But by some miracle, we made it to the stores just as it was getting dark. So we're in there, and he's looking for a specific color, and it has to be this color. Me, idiot that I am, foolishly ask, what's so important about this drink anyways? He pulls the red Faygo out of the cooler, and he points it at me, and he asks, have you ever heard of Homestuck? And that, my friends, is the first time I'd ever heard of Homestuck. High, anxious, and uncomfortable, 45 minutes from my comfort zone at the whims of someone I owed money to. To say my first impression was less than impressive would be an understatement. How's it going, nerds, cryptids, and other creatures? If you've made it this far and you've seen the title of this video, you've no doubt figured out what we're talking about today. That's right, we're talking about one of the biggest internet phenomenon in the history of the medium. And since there's no better way to start a video than with a meme, hey y'all, let me tell you about Homestuck. I haven't read it, and neither of you. That's right, it's Homestuck Hardmode, the 10.5-year retrospective on the phenomenon so big, it once crashed the internet. To say my history with the franchise is spotty at best. I've mostly only existed at the peripherals of its entire oeuvre for the past 10 years. After that, my run-ins with the fans were mostly negative, and I grew to resent them, and through them, resent the thing itself. But I'm tired of being angry, and this work and its impact has meant a lot to a lot of people who mean a lot to me now. And I finally decided to check out what it's all about. And if you're here with me, then you've also not read Homestuck, right? Because this video is only for non-Homestucks. You hear me? Non-Homestucks. So if you've read the Homestuck, you should leave now, and we'll see you all in the next video. Okay? Are they gone? Dope! So if this video is for non-Homestucks, and I haven't read it, and you haven't read it, then what qualifies me to even make this video in the first place? That, my friends, is my 3 degrees in film and media studies and fine art. And no, you can't see them, but I promise they exist and are really real and printed on fancy paper and everything with signatures and stamps and all 9 yards. I also have an official vote of endorsement from a server full of Homestuck nerds. The most Homestuck, non-Homestuck. You can see it here, or wherever I end up editing it in. Those and my over 300 plus hours of research into this dumb, amazing, stupid, lovely, ridiculous thing, it honestly would have taken less time to read the damn thing, but that would have defeated the purpose. So I think I'm qualified. And if you don't agree, well then feel free to click off the video. Please don't actually click off the video. I need your watch time in order to get YouTube to think that I'm worthy of promoting in the algorithm, so please stay. Thanks. So back to my story. After that night in 2012, I've got to be honest with you. I have been desperate to know what that drink tastes like. So, it says in the script that I bought one, but I didn't actually. The damn thing costs $14, and I wasn't about to spend $14 on a soda that tastes like cherries. I fucking hate cherries. So, that was a stupid gimmick, and I'm glad I skipped it. I honestly debated on how to lead into this section portion of the video, before ultimately deciding that the best way would be describing my waffling on how to lead into it, which is what I'm doing right now. For most works, a summary of the narrative would begin with, like, the start of the plot, at the beginning of its chronology, or as the characters are being introduced, or something simple like that. In fact, the description of what Homestuck is on Homestuck.com does just that. Homestuck is, according to Andrew Hussey, the author of Homestuck, a tale about a boy and his friends in a game they play together, about 8,000 pages, don't say we didn't warn you. This description is what most summaries I've encountered online are derivative of. And while this is technically correct from a certain point of view, no, stop it, cut the meme. We're not gonna run a Star Wars meme and get demonetized by Disney in this video. Now, again, while this is technically correct from a particular perspective, it is not adequate nor sufficient to encompass the scale, scope, magnitude, reach, or impact that Homestuck as an entity embodies. After all, this is, I'll call it a webcomic that at one point had so many viewers attempt to view one of its updates all at once that it crashed Newgrounds, Mega Upload, MSPA.com, MSPA forums, YouTube, Twitter, Tumblr, and the then burgeoning Justin TV, which at the time was basically the entirety of the internet. My theory is that it is not a story of four friends, the friends they make, the people they meet, the obstacles they overcome, and the game they play, and all the time-hopping, multi-dimensional, universe-destroying shenanigans that happen along the way. Well, that is certainly an aspect of what happens in Homestuck. Instead, my proposal is the story of Homestuck starts with and is about the audience. The plot, chronology, and narrative is about the characters, but the story is about the reader's personal journey. So how do you summarize a work that crashed the internet in one sentence and mention only the characters you meet on the first page? Should you mention any of the characters at all? Well, I don't have an objective answer, and I'm not sure that there is one. But I did make my own summary. A long version and a short version. Here's the short version. Homestuck is an interactive exchange platform for an audience member to experience a story that takes place within a narrative that contains a plot that is actually a pool metaphor inside a chess metaphor, inside a Jungian archetype metaphor, inside a Gnostic Christian philosophy metaphor, inside an Inception metaphor, inside a Matrix metaphor, inside a video game metaphor, inside a theater metaphor, inside a multimedia, multi-platform, transcendent, experiential epic form that could have only existed on the internet when and where it did, as a giant, sprawling experiment in meta theater storytelling. It's also hella fucking gay and stupid convoluted. It's also 8,000 pages long, 16,000 panels, and 245,000 words, with over 32 plus hours of collected animation and 10 plus hours of unique music. A decade-long parasocial journey between the very first readers and the embodiment of the fandom and the construct of the thing itself. That thing whose quantitative diegetic plot constructs a narrative that is often summarized as the coming-of-age story of four friends, their friends, the people they meet, and the friends they make, and the strange world-ending game they play, with the fate of several universes and timelines hanging in the balance, and the epic journey it takes to reach their goal. Hijinks and shenanigans ensue. So, yeah, that is the short version. And assuming you managed to parse any of that, which it is dense and obtuse, and I'm well aware of that, then you are well on your way to understanding this dataless labyrinth of an undertaking that we have in front of us. I am positive that this summary is inadequate, however, because as of April 13th of this year, the 10th anniversary, I attempted to begin learning what Homestuck was without reading it to make this video. And when presented with an idea similar to this from PBS Idea Channel, I found it just as about impenetrable as fucking lead. So I also wrote a long version. And if you look down at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that when I say long version, I mean long version. And I am leaving out the vast majority of what happens in this comic. So, what the heck even is a Homestuck? A summary. There are 8 human children and 8 human adults who are the guardians of those human children, of which we meet approximately half, and the other half die before they enter the story. Here's a picture of one of their taxidermized corpses. Did I mention how I think Homestuck is one of the greatest works of meta-modern fiction and metatextual multi-platform narrative and the future of narrative works? Because I do. Anyways, of the 8 human children, 4 of them don't show up until later, when they're summoned into existence by John Metal Alchemist here. So we can just put a pin in them for now, and leave them up there. So who do we have left? 4 kids and 2 adults. Cool. Alright, we can deal with that. John Egbert is a 13-year-old kid who starts the story in his bedroom on his 13th birthday on the 13th of April, the 4th month of the 9th year of the new millennium of the first year of the Obama presidency. And I wish that I could say that that was an irrelevant bit of trivia, but Obama comes up a lot in Homestuck. Our hero's journey begins... did I forget to mention that? Here's a can opener for that obligatory John Campbell reference, so go ahead and microwave yourself a bowl of that creamy hero of 1,000 faces soup, because we're going through our 12 steps of our hero's journey today, folks. You know, I did remember to say that I have 3 degrees in the subject matter, right? Film and digital media and storytelling, and I'm a graduate student in this stuff because I think I'm contractually obligated to mention John Campbell. Like, if I don't mention him and Jean Godard once a video, they break my thumbs or something. Anyways, back to the video. Where was I? Right, John Egbert. Our hero's journey starts off with John hang on, what the heck do you mean it doesn't start with John or any of the other kids? Well, then why the fuck did I spend 3 minutes introducing them? For fuck's sake, edit this script better next time. Me. Okay, so, put more pins on the board because none of the kids matter right now. So, the hero's journey of this long-form epic starts with you. Well, not you, because if you followed the instructions earlier, then you haven't read Homestuck, just like me. And we can all now laugh at those rubes who've read it, right? Because you all did follow my instructions, right? And no one here has read Homestuck? Good, well done, here's the cookie. So, the story starts with the homestuck.com/MSPA, that's MSPaintAdventures.com reader, and the prompt page, which asks them a question. It actually starts with them on the landing page of the website, and then they navigate to Homestuck page 1, and then they get the prompt page, and this is starting to feel like that assignment I had to do in 2nd grade, where I had to write an essay on how to make a peanut butter sandwich, where I had to assume that the person reading the essay didn't know how to use a fucking knife! Oh, man. Hey, Anyways, what was I talking about? Peanuts? Homestuck. So, the story begins with the reader on the first page of the comic where they're prompted with a question in the style of a point-and-click adventure game. What will the name of this young man be? And then a link at the bottom of the page, enter name. Clicking this link will take you to the next page of the comic, rather than letting you name the young man in question. But there are hundreds, if not thousands, of accounts scattered across defunct and abandoned threads and project forums throughout the internet like a battlefield of raves for people who legitimately thought they were going to have to name this boy. People who spent hours or even days trying to come up with a name only to click the link and the game, which is just a looping GIF flash animation, to input automatically Zeusmel Poop Lord on repeat until you click the try again link at the bottom of this new page. Congratulations! You have just been dragged across the threshold by your nose, kicking and screaming into the unknown world that is Homestuck. Just a quick note, the chronology of Homestuck's narrative actually started years and years before where we're starting in this summary, in another timeline, in a different universe, and we'll get to that, just put a pin in it. But this is the easiest place to start the actual plot nonsense, and I do mean nonsense. So now we can unpin John Egbert from the wall, because that's who we're faced with, and the plot of Homestuck proper begins. John McHomestuck begins the webcomic standing in the middle of his room on his 13th birthday. He is the predominant point of view character and the main protagonist for the main narrative of the webcomic. And we're gonna shift gears. Yes, already. I know, we just started. Here, let me explain. Homestuck is broken up into acts, much like theater. To start, acts 1 through 4 exist as single acts, and then after that, acts 5 and 6 are each multiple parts that average out to be longer than the first 4 acts added together. And then act 7 is one single animation. To put this difference in scale into perspective, this webcomic ran from 2009 to 2016. Act 4 wrapped up around the end of 2010, and Act 6 finished in the beginning of 2016. There are some extenuating circumstances we'll get into, but that is the difference in scale we're dealing with. There's also one more thing. The first 4 acts of Homestuck are notoriously and infamously tedious, to the point that newcomers at this point in the franchise tend to have too experiences when jumping onto this non-stop locomotive. They're just recommended to outright skip Act 1 through 4 and go straight to the in-comic wrap-up that directly precedes Act 5 and just start there, from where the trolls are introduced properly. And we'll get to what trolls are, I promise, bear with me. You know the drill, pin, wall. Or they attempt to trudge through it while wanting to quit, or they actually do quit. Rest in peace, brave soldiers. Well and truly long before making it to Act 4, and subsequently are then begged to keep going by their hyperfixated Homestuck friend, who is most definitely the reason they're reading it in the first place, attempting to persuade the new reader with tempting placations and the assured promise of, don't worry, it gets better. We have one additional problem with the act structure that impedes this summary, that being, I have not read this comic, so I don't know what acts the following events actually fall into. So we're just gonna have to run through them loosey-goosey and get us to the meat of this story if we actually want to get through it. So, John, the self-absorbed, cake-hating, immature protagonist, and his internet friends, whom he's never actually met in real life. Rose the Lom, the sarcastic but surprisingly eloquent goth with the immeasurable lexicon. Dave Strider, the sword-loving bladesman hiding behind an ostentatious wannabe egotist cool guy facade. And Jade Harley, the enthusiastic but good-natured furry who isn't weird about it. Marksman, all managed to be the only players of a brand new beta of a brand new game called Spurb. Despite the statistical improbability of this occurring, these four friends managed to be the only four players of this new beta on the exact day of the foretold end of the world. The foretold end of the world that them playing the game also causes, but that if they didn't cause, they would also cease existing, probably. Okay, I'm being told that there are other players and that those players have no greater impact on the rest of the plot or narrative, and that other than a very passing reference at the very, very beginning, they are never mentioned or heard from again, and following the reset into the second timeline, are literally in a whole separate linearity of temporalness from the main story. Oh right, that. I did mention that this webcomic had separate timelines, didn't I? Well, put two and two together. It has time travel and stuff baked into its very mechanics. The storytelling mechanics of its very text are entrenched in its complete inability to be restrained to any type of linear form. So yeah, for our intents and purposes and the mechanics and diegesis of the story, these are the only four players that exist, for now. John and Rose and Dave and Jade manage to get each other into the game world, narrowly avoiding death by meteor or apocalypse. They then set about the task of playing the game inside what is essentially the Matrix, if the Matrix was somehow even more fucked up, and also Inception. It is worth mentioning that the entire time that these friends have known each other online, they have been being unceasingly harassed by a group of 12 internet trolls, who are now important to the plot, but only like 3 of them, so we can pin the others up there next to the 4 children who are still hanging up there all alone. Aw, pat pat. The trolls successfully managed to harass the children, now in the game world, into dooming their own timeline, which was technically already doomed because of their actions before the kids ever got involved. That, once again, we'll get to. And after a series of time travel attempts and nonsense and mischief and mayhem, and a progressive series of their own deaths, mostly Dave's, they managed to discover a game mechanic that will allow them to reset their doomed game into a harder game session, and will kill this session. Now, I've said that term a few times, so let's actually discuss what a game session of Spurb TM entails, in the briefest possible terms, and we will use our heroes as our players. When our 4 kids cross the threshold into the unknown world, they end up on worlds that are essentially giant game stages from hell. And I mean like Dante's Inferno style hell, or absurdist Task of Sisyphus style hell. But the core premise of what a game of Spurb involves is as follows. Above each world there are 7 gates that a hero must battle or otherwise make their way through to ascend to what is referred to as God tier. By and how they accomplish this task will prepare them for the final quest of their respective worlds, which will essentially be a boss battle. But like everything confusing in this game, it can be a puzzle or a challenge or an actual fight. If the heroes win, they will be ready to fight the battle on the central planet of the entire game's planetary system, Skya. Now here's where things get even stickier. On Skya, there has already been a battle going on between the forces of order and chaos. And how many pieces there are on this giant chessboard? No, really, it's a giant chessboard. No, really, I swear, just look. See, I'm not making this up. Anyways, on the chessboard, how many pieces there are and what abilities and powers those pieces have are based on whether or not the players were able to successfully complete a task prior to entering the game world. A task they probably didn't know they even needed to complete in the first place. That being, sampling a digital ghost that is part of the game's core mechanics with stuff. Any stuff, really. From your dead grandma's ashes, to a dead bird, to a dog, to a sword. It really doesn't matter. Just get stuff into that ghost. Now, this also acts as a double-edged sword. If you prototype nothing into your ghost, the game is unwinnable, and you end up essentially trapped forever in Spurb. But if you prototype too well, the game may be winnable, but you have unknowingly created a time limit for yourself to complete the game. Your 7 levels, your god tier boss battle, and your final fight, because the forces of chaos will win, and how good you made them will determine how much time you have. And if your seer isn't good enough, you won't know how long you've got left. Oh, and one more thing. You also have to breed the frog that creates the new universe before time runs out too. Although more than likely that will end up being your space player's god tier quest. Yes, I said that correctly. Stop fucking doubting me. The frog that creates the universe. And then once you've made them, you have to yeet them into a volcano. Yes, so it's simple really. Let's review. Buy a copy of Spurb, get some friends together, play the game, thus ending your entire planet and universe, and killing everything you've ever known or loved, and thrusting you into the unknown world whether you wanted to go or not. Meet the mentor figure who wants to help you and is also the instrument of your destruction in the form of this digital ghost. Fight through 7 layers of hell, or die and have your corpse kissed by one of your friends. What? I didn't say anything, moving on. Ascend to god tier, beat your god tier quest, breed the universe frog, yeet them into a volcano, fight the battle of chaos and order, beat the forces of chaos, and win the game. See? It's that easy. Also, there's a mechanic for death in this game in which if you die forever. Meanwhile, in an alternate reality, other versions of you will continue to try and play the game, who have always been the real and original version of you as far as they're aware, and try to win, while you're dead and exist in a pocket dimension made of dreams and nightmares in the furthest ring of space, forever lamenting on your failures alone for eternity, until one of your alternate future yous wins the game, and you presumably are most likely blinked out of existence. Or they lose, and well, who knows. Enjoy sleeping with that tonight. When the kids attempt the game the first time around, they fail, and John ends up dead, and Dave piles up so many of his own dead bodies, fixing the mistakes they all made, that it likely ends up traumatizing him, at least according to the fanfics I read. Hey, I said I didn't read Homestuck. As far as my own rules that I'm just making up as I go here, fanfic was valid research material, okay? So don't judge me. Attempt 2 Electric Boogaloo reboot goes smoother, if you could call it that. And under the coaching and guidance of the trolls, Dave and Jade managed to breed a universe frog for the purposes of a function known as a scratch, which they are informed about as the game continues moving forwards. A scratch is, to borrow a term from Magic the Gathering, a mulligan. A do-over, but with just enough stuff changed to make things harder this time around. The trolls themselves come from just such a scratch universe. Even though the trolls won their game, their victory was stolen from them, and we'll get to that too. The human universe is actually the universe that the trolls created when they bred their universe frog and won their game. And it turns out there is a reason that our kids' game is unwinnable. Their universe has cancer. I'm just face-palming so hard right now. You can't see it because I've either stopped animating my sprite or I've removed myself from the screen, but this just... oh boy, this webcomic. So, the key 4 trolls that they've been able to maintain contact with at this point in the story are Carcat, aka Angst McScreams-A-Lot, and Terezi, the bi-lesbian Matt Murdock ripoff, Gamzee, the juggalo, and Vriska, the no, that's it for now. Carcat coaches John through a process of what is essentially alchemy that allows him to create clones of himself and his friends' parents, who he then sends back in time to Earth to ensure that he and his friends are born and thus can play this game, so that he can once again ensure that he and his friends are born, and thus the circle of stupidity is complete. The trolls continue coaching the kids through the scratch process and what they should do. If they play their cards right, they can literally break the 4th wall and travel to the new game session with all the worlds from this game session with them to make the new one a winnable one, which finally brings us to the trolls. And this is the moment that anyone who has ever even heard of a Homestuck prior to clicking on this video was probably waiting on, either to see how badly I managed to screw up summarizing it, it's okay, you can come out of hiding, I know you didn't actually leave earlier, or because these little gray bug aliens and their candy corn horns are the only thing you've ever actually heard about this ridiculous webcomic. Which, fair. The story shifts to a side arc focused on the trolls in the world that they come from, and we learn that they played a session of Spurb prior to the humans in a universe prior to the one that the humans live in. Just don't ask. We learn about the fascist interplanetary empire society that the trolls live in. In that empire, there is a hierarchical dichotomy based on an incredibly horrifying biologically essentialist caste system that all of their species is stratified into from the moment of their birth until they are worked to death in the service of the highest members of that caste, members who themselves are also merely there to serve the whims of their god queen, her imperious condescension. We are introduced to 12 main trolls, and of them, only roughly 6 have any plot relevance, and I know I keep doing this where I give you numbers and then cut them in half, but you have to understand, Homestuck may have the most named characters with speaking roles or plot motivating roles of any narrative, and I don't know if that's true, but it's easily over 120 characters, and very few of them motivate the narrative of the story, even if they have plot relevance. Trolls are born as little human-faced caterpillars and are adopted by giant sperm-colored monsters known as, well, it doesn't matter what they're known as. These spermsters are the trolls' guardians and mentors until they come of age. However, it is pretty much revealed that most trolls live alone and basically raise themselves. Or they have to feed their spermsters, and if their spermster dies, they will be murdered by the Imperial forces, which often forces the troll children to commit heinous acts, like mass murder. The biological essentialist caste system I mentioned earlier is actually based in some observable fact, to a degree, where different colors of blood actually grant the trolls different types of abilities and different physiological features. Whether or not these abilities and features are actually better or worse than others is, well, part of the comic's greater thematic exploration through a totally separate arc, also explored later in this act, known as the Ancestor arc, which introduces us to a totally different set of 12 characters. Basically, long ago, there were 12 trolls who were a lot like the 12 trolls we know. They're actually referred to as ancestors in the text of the comic, which is a word that makes literally absolutely no sense in any feasible way as we as humans understand the term because of the way that trolls reproduce, which, before you even have to ask, yes, not only is troll sex ed and introductory biology 101 covered in the comic, it is covered in mind-numbing detail, and to summarize this bucket of biohazard as simply as possible, trolls don't have genetic lineages, so the way we think of ancestry is literally impossible in troll society. But these trolls look like the trolls we already know, have the same last names as the trolls we already know, have the same birthdays, and even the same aspects, so they are clearly linked somehow. So let's just call them previous reincarnations of the trolls we know, because it is close enough for our purposes. And on top of that, they were basically D&D characters, like bards and archers and stuff. And one of them is Troll Jesus. And Troll Jesus leads a rebellion against the blood-based caste system and dies horribly. In fact, everyone dies horribly. And when I said he was Troll Jesus, that wasn't like an exaggeration. He gets strung up by a device, and that device has a shape, and that shape becomes a symbol. And this event and the rebellion that symbol represents is why there are no adults on the troll homeworld, which is a thing, and a thing I probably should have mentioned before when I brought up the sperm monsters. But whatever, I'm bringing it up now, it's brought up, and we're moving on. The world building in this thing is as dense as lead, and as flimsy as cotton candy sometimes, or a house of cards. When we meet our trolls on their homeworld, they are adolescents approximately the same age as our 4 main human kids, and they've managed to figure out how to play a game of Spurb as well. They play their version of the game, and their ragtag group is led by 2 trolls, the mutant-blooded Karkat, who hides his blood color from everyone else because of course he does, and the spider-descended troll child, Vriska, who is responsible for making Earth, but also maybe responsible for making a demon dog monster that manages to invade the troll session right as the trolls are about to win and claim their prize. It's not really clear. How much Vriska is actually responsible for is up for debate, and I really don't want to start a discourse, so I'll just link some posts in the description and you can go check them out for yourself. but she is the single most polarizing character in the entire comic. Even more so than the murder clown and the main villains, which probably says something, but a lot of former fans have fandom-specific trauma related to fandom wank surrounding heated debates about her specifically. So I really do not have the knowledge or experience or capability to dissect her in what is supposed to be a summary video. Again, links in the description. Referring to the demon dog monster, he proceeds to chase the trolls through space as they flee on a meteor spaceship thing towards the new universe they just invented, the human universe, the one our kids are in. Or, well, were in before they played Spurb and blew that up too. And this is where they are for the entirety of the chronology up to this point. That's where they were when they were interacting with the kids via the internet chat function. They were on this meteor. They were here when they were harassing them. They were here when they were helping them. And they're here when Dave sends the Juggalo troll videos of the insane clown posse, and we'll come back to that. Jesus, I'm gonna need a new bulletin board. If Vriska is responsible for making Earth, Karkat is responsible for making humans. And whether it is confirmed in text or just heavily implied that this is why we have red blood like him, which is a mutant aberration on the troll hemo spectrum, it has been difficult to confirm using only third-party sources. But there seems to be a pretty solid fandom consensus that this is the case, and that the text does guide confirmation that way, intentionally or not. So I'll roll with it. When the trolls guide the humans through how to scratch their universe and all the shenanigans happen, it splits the kids into two groups. Dave and Rose, who end up on the meteor with the trolls and put yet another pin in that, and John and Jade, who are in some sort of spaceship that belonged to... Oh, fuck! I didn't set up any of the... that would make the spaceship make... Okay, alright, so real quick. The forces of chaos and order that I mentioned before that are battling on the central planet of the entire solar system of the game's universe. Okay, so they each have their own planets too. And so in order to get to the center planet, in order to have their battle in the first place, they each have their own spaceships in order to get there. And one of the ships that belongs to the species of Order is a ship that Jade and John commandeer, and this enables them to follow the yellow brick road through a chalk zone portal into another chalkboard in the author, Andrew Hussey's, house, and take them into the new universe through the barrier in the fourth wall. And in order to make sure that the ship can make it through in the same amount of time that it will take the meteor that the other characters are on to do that, Hussey has to exactly measure the distance between the two portals with a measuring stick. And I'm just gonna take a moment, if you'll excuse me for a second. Basically, to summarize this super simply, the plot gets super meta for like a while, and two of the kids get a spaceship and fly through the fourth wall into the author's house, then back into the comic in the new story. Okay, and the entire journey takes 3 seconds, but due to the time dilation, it also takes 3 years. So, our kids are 16 to 17-ish when they come out on the other end. Alright, got it? No? Cool. Me neither. Moving on. For fuck's sake, this goddamn comic. So, let's take a pin off the wall, please. So, this one, Dave and Rose. Alright, Dave and Rose on the meteor. When they arrive as God tiers, they begin their own 3-year journey to the new Earth and universe, but their spaceship substitute is also inhabited by trolls. 12 of them! Yes, more pins! Okay, in addition to the 4 we've already met, Karkat, Terezi, Vriska, and Gamzee, we have Aridin the Incel, Nepeta the Catgirl Fujoshi, Kanaya the Vampire Maiden, and there's also Equius the Horse Furry, Solix the Computer Gamer, Tavros the weeaboo in a wheelchair, Theferi, the basic rich girl, and Aradia the... wait 1 second. So they just explained to me who Aradia is and what she does. And I have no clue. And the wiki is absolutely no help, which is par for the course. Okay, on Alternia, before the trolls ever played their session, Aradia is the troll who discovered Spurb. But before the trolls entered the game, she's killed because of reasons in a giant explosion that one of the trolls caused with lasers from his eyes. And she ends up getting put into a digital ghost that I mentioned earlier, and then that ghost ends up getting put into a robot that does stuff, but is ultimately not pivotally important until she ends up blowing up. When the robot blows up, it awakens her god tier self, which she then uses to freeze the dog monster that's been pursuing the trolls. She then uses his body as a portal to teleport to the green sun. Just pin it. I know we just took pins off the wall, but pin it. And she also propels the meteor towards its destination so that her friends can get away. So she's pivotally important to the plot. She's barely in the story, which makes a lot of sense and is par for the course force for this damn webcomic. As I mentioned earlier, there are like 150 characters in this entire thing, and very few of them are story motivating. I haven't even mentioned the primary antagonist of the series up to this point, because in the grand scope of the overarching narrative, he's less important than a bowl of cornflakes. And he gets usurped by an even bigger antagonist, both physically and metaphorically, who ends up being a wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey, prophesized forever villain that has always been, but also never was, but has to be in order for the story to even happen. And it's just so... Dave and Rose arrive on the meteor, and the new trolls that we finally meet are all there. Except they're not. Just before they arrived, Dave sent Gamzee that video of the Insane Clown Posse, and it turns out that back on the troll homeworld, this band was Gamzee's religion, and he sees this video as utter blasphemy. Having run out of the narcotic that keeps him stable, he goes on a murder rampage through the meteor. Eridan the Incel also goes on a murder rampage, inspired by the murder rampage of his fellow troll. After being rejected by Pfeffery, the royalty troll, he decides that if he can't have her, no one can, and kills her. He then tries to kill Kanaya, the vampiress, first killing the troll incubation codex that Kanaya is in charge of protecting. Think like the Kryptonian birthing matrix from Man of Steel, but for color-coded candy cornea. He then blasts Kanaya, blowing a hole through her torso, exposing her spine, and leaves her for dead, which turns out to be his biggest mistake because she comes back with a vengeance, and also a chainsaw, and cuts his incel ass in half. Meanwhile, Gamzee clubs Nepeta and Equius to death with bowling pins, and Vriska kills Tavros. Terezi finds all of the bodies, and being blind, blames Vriska, who, as far as she is concerned, has always had it out for everyone, and so Terezi kills Vriska, thus leaving the only trolls left alive, Karkat, Kanaya, Terezi, and Gamzee, who's only stopped from his murderous rampage because Karkat walks up to him and gently pats him on the cheek. Pat, pat. Solix is also alive, but he was blinded by the events that happened and also lost his teeth. Okay, that I don't even know where to begin with all of that. It's a lot. There's a lot of... But that's the scene that Dave and Rose arrive amongst. Just total rainbow carnage, and it's not pretty, nor is it particularly pleasant, and the remaining thoroughly traumatized surviving trolls, and the two equally traumatized, but for different reasons, humans, begin their own 3-year journey through the various reaches of several universes to the new game session and the new horror and trials that await them there. All the while, still pursued by the dog demon chaos monster that I mentioned before, who, by the way, unleashed an attack so powerful that it blew up the previous universe. So, like, it's not a particularly great situation. Now, let's address the Green Sun. Outside of the boundaries of all of the universes and all of the universe frogs is a single uber universe known as the Furthest Ring. At the center of that universe is a massive green sun the size of 2 universe frogs put together, which is the power source for a bunch of stuff. The Furthest Ring lies outside of the inception matrices of all the Spurb game sessions, as well as the universe frogs that the games create when they're successful. And it is through this massive indefinite expanse that the meteor is traveling. It is here that the pocket dream dimensions exist, that the deceased have been suspended in indefinite purgatory, not actually inside the game as I had previously indicated, but because there were mechanics for death and dreaming and resurrection in the game itself, listing it back there made the most sense to move past that. So this leaves all of our current players on track to the new game session, except for the dead ones. So let's discuss what happens to them. As I just mentioned, when you die, you end up in a pocket dimension where you're pretty much stuck living out dream nightmare reality forever. This is true. These pocket dimensions are referred to as dream bubbles, and they can be reached by falling asleep and waking up in the body of one of your alternate dead selves and watching their experience through their eyes, or by passing through the boundaries of the dream bubble physically if you find it while exploring the Furthest Ring, such as while on a spaceship or a giant meteor factory hurtling through several universes. And for now, our dead players are trapped in these, but they will become relevant later. And the entirety of the events I just described, the ones directly preceding and causing and then following the scratch that set the kids and trolls on course for their new destination, is part of an event known as the Critical Moment and S-Cascade. This 13-minute flash animation ended Act 5 and also served as the start of the next arc of the entire comic, which made it a pretty critical update for fans to want to see. However, there are several more key things to note. Prior to this comic's update, there had been a countdown timer to its release, and on the day of its release, October 25th, 2011, or 10/25/11, well, let's take a detour. Homestuck is one of the most popular things that has ever existed, period. Full stop, end of sentence. It is most likely the most popular web media that has ever been originated online and existed entirely on the internet for its entire pre-syndication run. In anticipation for the amount of traffic that this Flash animation was going to receive, Andrew Hussey uploaded the Flash animation to then ubiquitous animation hosting website Newgrounds.com, which saw so much traffic from simultaneous users attempting to access the animation that it crashed the entire site. The Flash animation was then uploaded to several other locations, including Mega Upload, MSPA.com, and YouTube, all of which also crashed. Fans talking about and refreshing for updates, attempting to ascertain whether or not the websites hosting the animation had come back online, and then those fans who were still able to see the animation attempting to stream it also caused Twitter, Facebook, and then fledgling streaming platform Justin TV to crash intermittently as well. And of course, the MSPA forums themselves were almost entirely unusable. Estimates for this day have suggested that at one point there were likely 12 million unique users attempting to access the animation at one time, and this was not even the height of Homestuck's popularity yet, which is believed to have peaked between 2013 and 2014, just before the infamous Gigapause, which, for those of us not in the know, was a year-long hiatus that the webcomic took due to undisclosed circumstances that are rumored to have been legal troubles surrounding the Homestuck adventure game project, a project which had a Kickstarter that met its goal in less than 12 hours, and over the course of its fundraising, raised almost $2.5 million. But I digress. This tangent went quite a ways off track, and I just wanted to emphasize how popular this franchise and work really was, because I think that those of us on the outside really don't appreciate just how big it got. Back to the story, which is describing what actually happened in the animation S Cascade, or at least some of it. In an attempt to defeat the dog demon that has been chasing the trolls, the kids devise a plan to use the cancer that has infected their universe and thus rendering their game session unwinnable as an explosive to destroy the green sun that gives this demon and several other entities their powers. Essentially, a tumor bomb. The reason why they believe that this will work is because they were told that it would by a magic cue ball, as well as by the voices of Eldritch nightmare horrors that live in the furthest ring and speak to them while they sleep. Just bear with me, I know. The voice coming from the cue ball actually belongs to that main antagonist that I mentioned previously, the first one, not the bigger one that comes later and is actually important. This is not the only time that unimportant antagonist shows up in the plot, but it is the most significant impact that he makes on the story and the emotional journey of the audience, and thus, it's the only time he gets to have special story motivator status in this summary. Congratulations, little buddy. So the kids execute their plan, and they take the bomb to the green sun, and it's all very dramatic, and people die, and people almost die, and at one point someone dies, and then they get resurrected on their bed, and they turn into a dog morph, and the demon dog tries to stop them, and the bomb goes off, and oh no, plot twist, it doesn't destroy the green sun, but it turns out time works really weird in the Outer Rim. It's just silly me. Furthest ring. How did I get those mixed up? It turns out that time works really weird in the furthest ring, and the cancer bomb ends up creating the green sun. Oh dear. It turns out, kids, you should never trust the advice of weird men speaking to you from magic cue balls. The creation of the green sun also summons the actual main and primary antagonist of the webcomic, Lord English. But we don't actually need to worry about him just yet. John, Jade, Dave, Rose, Karkad, Kanaya, Terezi, Gamzee, they're all en route to the new universe that they've just created, having escaped the remains of the previous one, which had been destroyed by the blast of the dog demon that's still chasing them since they didn't destroy the green sun, and he still has all his power. The deceased trolls are suspended in a pocket-dimensional purgatory, and the story has been sent racing towards a new threshold into a brand new unknown world. In the meantime, we, the audience, have an entirely new universe to explore. In the Homestuck vernacular and vocabulary and meme rhetoric, a post-Scratch universe is ready and ripe for the picking. With our post-Scratch universe, we have 4 new kids and their 4 caretakers, which we can now unpin from the wall. Finally! The first of the 4 kids is John's grandmother, whom we met before as ashes that got turned into a ghost. Except now, she's a 16-year-old girl, and John is her grandfather, and he's the one that's deceased this time around. And here's his taxidermized corpse, because it's better not to ask questions. Our heroine's name is Jane Crocker, and if that last name sounds familiar, like perhaps the brand of a particular line of of prepackaged baked goods. That's not a coincidence. No, as it turns out, Jane Crocker is the heiress of Crocker Corps, which is this comic's version of Betty Crocker, TM. Betty Crocker is also a character, and we'll get to that. Jane is very much like John in a lot of ways, having an interest in pop culture and nerdy things, but also she has her own group of friends whom she's never met in person. First, we have Dave's older brother, Dirk, who's now the younger brother in this new timeline and world, and he is also good at swords, but he can build robots and make AI tech, which seems to have replaced his fascination with puppets from the previous timeline, or at least redirected it into something more productive. He also wears Gurren Lagann sunglasses that have Kit from Knight Rider inside. Following Dirk, we have Roxy Lalonde, who is now Rose's daughter. And she's just as spunky as you would expect from what we grew to learn of our sarcastic Lalonde friend in the previous timeline. She also seems to be just as smart as her daughter mother, and begins to understand things about the world of Spurb and Skya long before any of the characters enter the game world. And like Rose's mother, and Rose, well, on the Meteor, she's an alcoholic at age 16, so that's not great. And finally, we have Jade, who is the grandfather of Jade in the original timeline, and this time is her grandson. And much like all of the other Guardians that we met, Jade is dead this time around. We don't get to see her because she's perished in her quest to understand the mysteries of Spurb that had been left as artifacts on Earth. Jake lives on an island, much like the one that Jade lived on, but his island is very much destroyed due to the machinations of Betty Crocker, who is a witch. He also probably is in love with Dirk, at least according to all the sources that I've encountered. And he talks about his love for Dirk with Jane, despite knowing that Jane is in love with him. And it's a very convoluted, messy thing between stupid teens, I think. It's complicated. Let's talk about Betty Crocker. In this version of the timeline, Betty Crocker is her imperious condescension. Yeah, the troll empress god queen that I mentioned earlier from the previous timeline. She somehow made it to New Earth and took over using baked goods and sweets. She also has lieutenants in form of the insane clown posse who get elected president, and also Guy Fieri, who's the Antichrist. At one point, Dave, this version of Dave, older brother adult Dave, who is not called Alpha Dave, even though this timeline is called the Alpha Universe, but there is an Alpha Dave in Homestuck, but that Dave is one of the Daves from the previous universe known as the Beta Universe, and all of that just makes me want to tear my freaking hair out. Anyways, Bro Dave, as well as adult Rose, attempt to lead a rebellion against the forces of Crocker Corps, and they die. But I think Dave beheads the ICP, and Rose kills Guy Fieri. Eventually, the new players make their way into the game world through a series of very convoluted and painful trials and errors, and they also do so without managing to get any stuff into their digital ghosts, and thus their world is destroyed with them trapped in their game of Spurb, and their session is stuck in a stalemate. Now, normally this would mean that their game is unwinnable and that they were forever trapped. However, they are fortunate enough to have an alternate version of their parent children coming to help them in some period of time with their own prototype worlds in tow, and this will supposedly make their game session one that can be won and allow them to claim the ultimate reward. But for now, we have to go back to the first kids. On the battleship with John and Jade, they end up entering a dream bubble in which they find Vriska, who has refused to give up despite being dead, and is determined to find a way to win the game. And in so doing, she has discovered that there is an even bigger threat than the one they had been facing this entire time. This is the main antagonist that I had mentioned before, the one that was brought into existence by the creation of the Green Sun. A Hulk-like monster of a man known as Lord English, who is flashing billiard balls for eyes. Yes, really. It turns out that this entity has found a way to become essentially all-powerful and cheat death, and he is now searching through the furthest reaches of the game and the universes to find the last remnant of what he believes is the only threat that can finally destroy him. Fortunately for the kids, it happens to be this house-shaped object at their feet. It doesn't go exactly like that, but essentially the kids just happen upon it. And John just sticks his hand in it. Like, oh great, nice going, protagonist-kun. The ultimate weapon that is theoretically the only thing that can ultimately and finally destroy a godlike immortal being, and you're just gonna touch it. Brilliant. Well, it doesn't immediately vaporize John as much as it probably should have, and he instead starts glitching out. No, like, actually glitching out. And glitches and bugginess and painting the medium as a trope become like an active part of the storytelling mechanic of this narrative moving forwards. Well, John glitches so hard that he nopes out of existence, at least as far as Vriska is concerned, and he ends up teleporting to the new game session where he just kinda has to wait. And so he does. It's very anticlimactic in that regard. Back with the new kids, things go very, very poorly, and eventually her imperious condescension has entered the game world as well, and it is revealed that she is now working for Lord English. She ends up taking over the mind of her own daughter? Well, she takes over Jane's mind with a headband, and Jane immediately starts attacking Jake. Back on the battleship, Jade is left alone, and she's taunted by one of the horror terrors, which is a feature of the game that I mentioned only briefly before as those Elder Tours that convinced them that their plan to destroy the Green Sun would work. Up until this point, they've barely been in the game at all other than that one part, but they suck and are bad and aren't great. And that combined with some other stuff, and also probably some mind control as well, Jade turns evil too, aka Grimbark, which is just like normal Jade, except she's a werewolf and gray. I mentioned that, right? That Jade got turned into a furry? Well, I swear I did, but at some point she merged with a version of her own dog. The same dog that the demon dog also got merged with, that is following the trolls and Rose and Dave, because there are many alternate versions of all of the characters in the story, including all the pets. Well, except one, but I digress. Well, Jade's a furry dog witch, and she gets turned evil and goes Grimbark, and she teams up with Crocker Jane, and they kidnap Jake and Roxy, who then get thrown in jail. Roxy is instructed to steal nothingness from an object that doesn't exist, so thus making it exist. And eventually, she manages this. And then all hell breaks loose, all at once! The trolls and the battleship arrive in the new session, and so does the demon dog, and a fight breaks out, and everyone dies. And I mean everyone. Gamzee shows back up and has gone full homicidal clown mode, and he is just ready to murder. And Carcat falls in lava, and Dirk gets teleported to the other end of the universe, and Dave gets stabbed through the chest, and a sword gets thrown at Crocker Jane, and Jake leaps in front of it to try and save her, and they both end up getting run through, making both of them die. And it's just, eventually there are like 4 of them left alive, and it's Terezi until she ends up dying of blood loss, John and Roxy, which is actually 3 people, but I can't count. And they try to work out a plan for what to do next, since they're now well and truly fucked. Terezi reveals that she knows about John's new powers by headbutting him in the face, and then everything clicks into place. Rhyme unintended. Terezi makes a plan and gives John a list of tasks to accomplish, and using his powers, which he now calls retcon powers, he literally steps outside the linearity of the plot, moving beyond the bounds of causality, and goes back in time in the comic and begins changing things. And here with the retcons, we've reached a huge point of contention in the comic, because remember what I told you before. Cascade happened at the end of 2011. Well, Game Over dropped at the end of 2014, the day after Cascade dropped, and the retcon started directly following that. Game Over ended the Gigapause. Game Over is the events that I just described when all these characters died. And following that event, one of the characters literally changes the canon of the comic, and the characters that come back to life in the new continuity are similar but different characters from the ones that the fans had grown to love and care about for 3 years following the start of Act 6. I personally think that this is one of the most brilliant things about this story. The way it handles death and mortality and rebirth and continuity, and that excursion through meta theater and meta narrative and meta text, and wow, that's a lot of metas. That is one of the best parts of what makes this story a story worth studying. But I am ultimately an outsider and a newcomer. I was not there and did not grow up with these characters, and the people that did, who formed years-long parasocial bonds with these characters, were crushed by this. No, they were traumatized by this, because there are tons of blog posts, videos, and articles about people who were traumatized by this narrative decision. And to those people, I hope that you moved on to better things that made you just as happy as this used to. And that maybe one day you can come back to this and remember it for the joy it gave you and not the pain that it caused. But that's the thing that happens in the story. John goes back in time and retcons the story and saves Vriska from dying at the hands of Terezi and prevents Rose from becoming an alcoholic on board the Meteor. He ensures that Gamzee gets locked in a refrigerator, and then he teleports to the new world again, and he waits. Again for the first time. Then, from Jade's perspective, John dies, and she has to live with and cope with what has happened while also being alone for the entire 3-year journey. And the comic basically directly states what I just explained, that the old versions of the characters don't exist, that these new ones deserve a chance to succeed too. And then shit breaks loose again. This time, when the kids and the trolls make it to the new game, they are prepared and they manage to fight through without anyone dying permanently. Meanwhile, in the alternate pocket dimension, an army of alternate selves and ghosts, including ancestor reincarnations of the trolls, gather to face off against Lord English, and this army is led by Vriska. And in a giant game of pool metaphor that a lot of fans didn't like either, Vriska, who is the 8-ball, switches places with Lord English. His eyes stop flashing, and then he becomes the 8-ball and gets knocked back into a black hole. 8-ball, corner pocket, game over. A giant door is summoned. John reaches out for it, and the final flash animation ends with them opening it and looking through into the new world that they just created. There are 2 epilogues for Homestuck, and only one I will talk about. There was a snap story that was released in the months following the ending of the comic on April 13, 2016 that showed how life was like in the new world leading up to October 25th of the same year, in which John smashes his phone, thus ending the updates in a visual sight gag, and the journey of these characters came to a close. I need you to understand that I skipped a lot in order to summarize this story in what was hopefully less than 30 minutes. It is not. There are tons of characters whom I didn't even mention, and it's just a lot and very convoluted, but this is accurate enough to explain what Homestuck is to someone who's never read it before. Homestuck is a lot to take in, and it's not good. Even people who like it say it isn't good. And I have an entire part 2 for this video planned where I discuss the actual impact of Homestuck that this video was kind of necessary for. In fact, that part 2 is the video I actually wanted to make, but this video was necessary as a primer for that video to exist at all. I had to make a summary like this because I needed a video that was the type of summary that specifically I was looking for and needed back when I was starting to research Homestuck for myself in April of this year, of which there was not one. There's a fan-made wiki, and it is almost literally no help unless you already have a working knowledge to build from. I hope now that you've reached the end of this summary video, you can at least parse together with context clues at least a little bit of it. Because I skipped a lot. I didn't discuss the name of the specific chat clients, or that the version that the trolls use ignores temporal continuity, and that allows them to talk to their future and past selves, which there is one of those, or that there are 2 different dating systems based around quadrants for 2 of the different alien species in the game, the trolls and felt creatures, and I'm not going to name those dating systems. I didn't even bring up buckets. I made it over 40 minutes into a Homestuck video, and I only just now mentioned buckets, and you should honestly thank me for that. Where? What do you mean? Okay, I barely mentioned buckets. There's a character who eats plutonium, that's a thing. Or that the big bad Lord English is actually part of an entirely separate alien species that are basically immortal gods, and that they actually are 2 twins sharing the same body, and that the other twin, Calliope, ends up in a relationship with one of the kids. Or that Lord English, prior to becoming an evil demiurge, tried to be a manga artist, but sucked at it. Just to give you a tiny core sample of the vast amount of material that I left out to boil this down to something that could explain what happens while also being even remotely digestible. And beyond what's in the canon text itself, there's so much Homestuck material. There's the spin-offs, the games, culture, the fandom, the memes. It's a lot. It really has shaped a generation, and it changed the internet. Probably a lot of which in ways we as outsiders didn't even know. I sure didn't before starting this project. And if you stay tuned for part 2, I will discuss that aspect of Homestuck in much greater detail. I'd like to take this time to thank the following creators. Links to their videos are in the description below. Their videos were critical and pivotal in this video being able to exist at all, as I was sticking to third-party sources and not reading the source material, and without their content, I don't think that would have been possible. Liking this video will let me know that you actually want to see that second part, and subscribing will let you know when it comes out, and you should click that bell icon to keep yourself notified if that ever does happen. You should comment to drive that algorithmic engagement so that YouTube will promote me in that algorithm, because that will definitely help me. And maybe while you're down there, check out the link to my Patreon, and if you're over there for any length of time, go ahead and maybe donate $1 or $2, because that would really help me quite a bit. Other than all of those calls to action and begging for support. Thank you all for watching this video, and I will see you all next time.